All right, well, good morning. It's great to be here. I had to speak in Manhattan last night, and so I actually didn't pull into the Ramada here. It's about 3:30 in the morning. It was an incredible drive, but this is something where if you know you have a calling, it's those moments when you're in the car for 6.5 hours in a snowstorm and you still have your fires burning because you know it matters. It's a very special feeling, and it's not what I ever thought I'd be doing, but this is great to be here this morning, and it was definitely God's blessing that I got here safe. Thank you. So my name's Les Bernal, and I just want to kind of tell you the title of my talk today. All right, and you need to work with me because the slides are to my right, so I'm going to work off the computer. Oh, okay, excellent, excellent. But I titled my talk today, what do you do when the toothpaste is out of the tube? Okay, that's the question I want to answer for you. And that question came from I was on a trip to the West Coast about a month ago, sitting down with a very prominent business executive who cares about this issue, who's with us on this issue. And he said to me, Les, what are you trying to do here with this government gambling thing? Are you trying to put the toothpaste back into the tube? And really, for most people, that's the fundamental question, because most people, even here in New York, if you ask them, do you think government should be promoting gambling on every street corner? Most people, up to over 70%, say no. But the answer is always, well, what can you do about it? It's too late. And I'm here to tell you it's not too late. And I think hopefully in the next 15 minutes you'll understand why it's not too late and why it's something that we have to change if we're going to change America. So my brief intro about myself is, Dwayne mentioned a few things about me, but I put that image in this presentation because this issue is a calling for me. I had never set out, if you asked me, 20 years ago that I'd be spending the prime years of my life traveling around the country, calling to get government out of the gambling business, I'd say it's crazy. It's beyond my comprehension. I grew up in the state of Massachusetts where the lottery has been around my whole life. It was something I never questioned. I was never a big gambler, but I'd buy an occasional lottery ticket. I'd been to a casino once or twice in my life. I played sports my whole life, and oftentimes gambling is a little bit part of that culture. So it's really a unique thing that I'm here before you today, because it is a calling. And for those of you who have ever had a calling of any nature, I think you understand sometimes, I frankly was reluctant at first. I didn't understand how I got here. I had this innate need, from my conscience, that I learned so much about this issue from working in the Massachusetts Senate. I had worked for a state senator who was opposed to casinos. We didn't even question the lottery back then. We just focused on the casino issue. But I learned so much about this issue and how extreme it's become and how government, this is a little, it's about gambling, but it's really about government, the direction of government. And so this has become the public voice of state government today across America. What else does government advertise? Nothing, except for military recruitment, right? Go out and spend money on the lottery, go out and visit your local casino. You're doing a civic good. And so this issue found me. And so I put that slide up there because I want you to understand that this is something where my conscience was awakened. And I hope today and going forward that I will awaken your conscience, but also from what you see in your communities, that your own conscience will be awakened enough to make you act on this, to work with Dwayne and Jason and your community leaders to get this, to stop government from doing this. So what's the problem, right? So some of you maybe say, in general society, what's the big problem with government-sponsored gambling? And before I get there, I want to say, what are the problems in our society today, putting aside the gambling issue? What are the big problems? One is, we have a lot of inequality and lack of opportunity, right? We just got off a presidential campaign where everyone talked about opportunity and the American dream, and is it still there for people? And that's a central core issue. The second issue is we have a culture of speculation, right? We keep calling casino capitalism on Wall Street, these guys getting special privileges, these big banks. Everyone else is picking up the freight for that. We're paying higher taxes. Our property values have gone down because of these subprime lending mess. We have this culture of speculation in our society that's hurting all of us, hurting our economy. And then thirdly, the big issue one of the big issues our country faces is we have I call it casino fiscalism. Okay, casino fiscalism. We've heard casino capitalism, right, from an economic standpoint. But governments across the country, state level and our federal level, we have casino fiscalism. bunch of gimmicks, right? We're teetering on the edge of bankruptcy, and we rely on gimmicks. So the first slide, the first topic I'm going to take then, so I would suggest to you today, and when we're done, I think to address those three issues I just talked about, those three major problems in America, all three of those big issues run through government-sponsored gambling. You can't change any of those three issues meaningfully unless government gets out of the gambling business in a meaningful way. So so the first one, this idea of the expendable New Yorkers, right? This idea that we have all this inequality today in our society, all this lack of opportunity. But what we've done, the public voice of state government here in New York and in many other states, is a public voice that makes millions of New Yorkers expendable, okay? Creating family dysfunction, creating addiction in order to feed off it, pushing citizens into deeper personal debt. So this image that you're looking at, to me, summarizes this issue more than anything else. That is a picture of a nun from Western New York who, just in the last 3 months, was arrested for embezzling money, more than $100,000 from where she worked. $100,000 she embezzled. A nun, okay? And you know why she embezzled it? She was addicted to gambling. She was addicted to slot machines, okay? And she was addicted to slot machines at a government-operated casino near where she lived, Batavia Downs, okay? A government program that turned a nun into a criminal. That's what we mean by an expendable New Yorker. That money that she lost, it went to, supposedly pay for public schools here, okay? But we made citizens like her expendable. And a nun. I mean, this is a woman who for 50 years lived an honorable life and made a difference in her communities, helping thousands of people. And we turned her into a criminal, feed on her addiction as a government program. The other part of this, in addition to that, so we have the story of Marianne Rapp from Western New York. We have, the idea or the reality that government gambling creates enormous family dysfunction. I mean, those of you who live in your communities, think how much gambling impacts families. It destroys families. We have more than 5% of our members of our society today. 5% of our citizens have some kind of gambling problem. That's 1 out of 20 people. That it destroys families, and it's promoted by government, and government's profiting from it. And the thing that's, I guess, incredibly troubling about this whole thing is these machines, especially the big moneymaker in government gambling, is about electronic gambling machines. We're on 60 Minutes a year and a half ago because they did an expose on electronic gambling machines. And the feature of that expose was a professor from MIT who has studied these machines. And this is her book that just came out last fall. It's called Addiction by Design. That's the title of her book. Addiction by Design. Knowingly, actively designing machines that addict people. Okay? And they'll say, well, we're not designing these machines to addict people. We're designing them to make as much profit as we can. And that's true. But in designing these machines to make so much profit, they have made them addiction delivery devices as a government program. So those of you who haven't seen or heard about Natasha Schull at MIT and her book, Addiction by Design, every legislator in the state of New York needs to read this. And this will awaken your conscience. Some people you'll debate in your communities will say, listen, no one's forcing these people to play these machines, right? She became an addict or he became an addict from their own doing. Well, you can make an argument, by definition, someone who's an addict has no free will, right? And when 60% of the machine profits, 60% of the slot machine profits come from people who are problem gamblers. Incredible. They don't have a business model without problem gamblers. But this idea that, this is somehow kind of voluntary tax, well, we have a taxation that depends on the misfortune of your fellow neighbor, of making somebody expendable. Like, how can who wants to live in a society like that? It's not a voluntary taxation. Do you think New York State has cheaper tax rates today because you have government gambling? Of course not. The truth is, almost every state in the country that has predatory gambling is one of the biggest, but they're teetering on the edge of bankruptcy. Starting with Illinois, they get them everywhere. They're putting them in every bar room now. They have slot machines. So this is a government program, a tax that depends on the misfortune of others. And those of you, you know this. I mean, Jesus' second commandment, right? Love your neighbor like yourself. Love your neighbor like yourself. Direct violation of that core principle, that commandment. We talked about slot machines, state lotteries themselves here in New York. They make money on scratch tickets. 80% of the profits from state lotteries come from 10% of the players. So the average player is irrelevant to the business model of the lottery. It's that out-of-control player, that 10% that the business model is based on. Addiction, creating addiction and personal indebtedness. So what I ask you here, and I guess the analogy I'd make is you're coming on the heels of this big gun law that was passed right here in New York State that made national headlines. They had to push through this gun law to protect people. That was the mission, right? To protect people, that's what they said. Well, to save lives. You have a government program. The public voice of state government in New York is a government program that just ruins people's lives. Look at the hypocrisy in that. That's your public voice of state government here. Yeah, so much push to reform gun laws. It's time we had that same passion and same intense analysis on government's gambling program, which is addiction by design. So I ask you today to leave here with one of the messages that no New Yorker is expendable. No New Yorker is expendable. Whether it's Marianne Rapp, whether it's our own families, no New Yorker is expendable. Okay. So my next slide here is just briefly want to talk about the image of what these scratch tickets are, because most people who don't gamble have very little understanding of how extreme it's become. You're looking at a $30 scratch ticket. The state of New York says a $30 scratch ticket. Okay? If that's not the epitome of a predatory business, I don't know what is. If that was Bank of America putting a subprime loan into a poor community, your state attorney general will be suing them, and rightly so. Okay? Here you have a government program selling $30 scratch tickets across the state of New York, trying to speed up quick draw games, which is an incredibly addictive game, lowering the age limits for that. Set for life, and actually it's called $1 million a year for life. And the other reason why I put that up there is we talked about the social inequality earlier. This creates an incredible financial inequality in our society. Today, if you make less than 25 grand a year, more than 40% of those citizens who make less than 25 grand a year think the most practical way to build wealth in America is to play the lottery. Think about it. That's the American dream for those people. 2 out of 5 people. It's not save your money. It's not go out and work harder. It's not go out and get yourself educated and get a new skill. It's, I'm going to buy a $30 scratch ticket. I mean, if that's not the epitome of a broken American dream, I don't know what is. And again, the public voice of government. Instead of encouraging citizens to save, pushing them into deeper debt, because the more you play, the more you lose. During the during the Great Depression, government stood up and they challenged the American people to buy savings bonds. Buy bonds. Invest in your country. So right after World War II, we had the highest savings rate in modern American history. We had a broad middle class. Today, we have a shrinking middle class, in large part because the public voice of government is this. And this is probably the most graphic slide. Okay? And I put that up there because literally, the target for this stuff in New York is young people. They're literally putting the hook into into New York young people's mouth. Literally putting the hook into their mouths with gambling today. Okay? And it's appalling. It should appall everyone here. They're trying to lower the quick draw age in this budget deliberations, lowering the age that you can gamble. Quick draw is the most incredibly addictive game. The state government here in New York, they released their own report. 10% of your youth in this state have a gambling problem, and 10% are at risk for a gambling problem. So you literally have 1 out of 5 kids in this state who have a gambling problem. And the answer is, instead of helping them, we're going to prey on them even more. Because you know what the big push is now? It's not enough just to lower the quick draw age. They're trying to legalize casinos on the internet, so that every smartphone, every dorm room, every home, every office in the country, that's going to be a casino 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, or a lottery retailer. And really what I call them is Facebook casinos. That's what they are. Companies that have these social media games on Facebook, they're becoming gambling companies. Zynga, maybe you've heard of Zynga. They make Farmville and games that are wildly popular with a lot of young people on Facebook. Zynga is becoming a gambling company. So your kids sign on to do Facebook. Now they'll be gambling. They lure your friends in to play online slot machines. That's appalling. If that doesn't get anybody alone, that is just, the notion that we're turning a group of young people, they already have incredible student loan debt, challenging with opportunity as it is, and we're going to prey on them to lose money. And their own study says that 20% of young people in New York have a gambling problem. So the next piece of this, kind of transition to this culture of speculation. All right, we have a culture of speculation, and this is a book written by a guy named John Bogle. You may have heard of him. He's the guy that founded Vanguard, which is one of the biggest index fund companies in America. Right, helped a lot of Americans save money, and he wrote a book called the Clash of Cultures, because that's really what we have, right? So people say all the time, isn't Wall Street like gambling? Isn't buying the stock market like gambling? And the answer is, it's not. Buying a stock is not gambling. There's an element of risk to it, but it's not gambling. I'm buying a piece of a company. Okay? I'm owning something. I have an asset. It may depreciate, but there's something physical that I own a piece of a company. The derivatives that you see on Wall Street and these big banks are doing, that's gambling. Okay? That's gambling. And we paid a price for that. And you know how they got those derivatives legal back in 2000? In the lame duck year of President Clinton's administration, they ran through a law that exempted these big financial institutions from state gambling laws. That's how they did it. So now these big banks go out and place bets, side bets on mortgages and so forth. And you're paying for that. So there's a major difference between investing and gambling. And really, but on a bigger picture, what we've done is we've moved from an economy of production, where we make things, goods and services, to an economy of speculation. Finance has a good purpose. It connects people with money to invest, and they allocate this money to socially useful purposes. So investing is a good thing, but gambling is about speculating for profit. There's no public benefit to that. There's no social benefit to that process. And so you see it in our banks today, right? Our banks today have become, all they do now is manage risk. Banks used to be the epitome of saving. That's what they were about, saving money. They eliminated risk. Now they're all investing in risk, and we're paying for it as an economy. And the problem with this culture of speculation is, again, it depends on the misfortune of others. These big hedge fund guys who bet against the mortgage business, they made billions, but they made their money at the misfortune of others. How do you have a society that's built on that? You can't. That's a failed model. And so some people, you'll go back to your communities and they'll say, well, listen, I'm with you in all this, but I hear you on this government gambling thing, but really, isn't just entertainment? Isn't just entertainment. So I put this slide up. There's a picture of Meryl Streep winning an Oscar, right? Because is it like watching the movies? Is it really like going out to dinner or having a glass of wine? And the answer is no, okay? And the best part about this issue is one of my favorite things to talk about is this is the only product or service in America where the people who own it and promote it don't use it. Think about that. Only product or service in America, the people who own it and promote it don't use it. The guy that is pushing Genting here that owns the big Aqueduct Casino, KT Lim, he doesn't gamble. He's not a hardcore gambler. MGM, which is pushing here they want a casino in New York City, Jim Murren, he doesn't gamble. I spoke last night in Manhattan, and they had an interview with the lottery director, Robert Williams. He acknowledged, before he became lottery director, he hardly ever bought a lottery ticket. What a ripoff. Governor Andrew Cuomo acknowledged he's not a gambler. What a public ripoff that is. And that's your public voice of government. So I don't care where people stand on the political spectrum. If you want to restore pride in our government, your public voice is a public ripoff. How do you get people to believe again in government? Either way, or believe in making things happen. It's a lie. So I call it the smartest guys not in the room, which is a play on the old Enron story, what they call the smartest guys in the room. So this is the smartest guys not in the room. They make billions off government gambling, but they themselves don't lose a dollar on it. All right. So at the end, some people say, this idea that, the concept of casino fiscalism, right? That, all this money is doing something socially good. It's paying for education. One of your local papers here in New York did a phenomenal story. Incredible, one of the best first-rate pieces of journalism I've seen in the last couple of years about the lottery being a shell game. That's what it is. Education, you don't have new money invested in education here in New York because of government gambling. You know, it's capped at 15%. Whatever that money comes in goes to the schools. So these guys who own these casinos and lottery retailers, they're making a mint. You haven't seen new investment in public education. It's just a shell game. Your taxes are still higher. Your schools are still in need of new funding. It's a gimmick, and you know it's a gimmick. But we need to tell people out there this has been one of the biggest public policy failures of the last 40 years in the state of New York. And it's time that New York State got out of the business. And I just put this quick image up there because really what we created at the federal level, right, we're teetering on a house of cards. That's it. We're just surviving in this house of cards, this casino fiscalism. That's what we're talking about. Gimmicks, right? And how do you not have gimmicks when what government incentivizes shapes the national character? I referenced the Greatest Generation before and how they encouraged people to buy savings bonds, right, back in the Great Depression. What was the iconic image from the Great Depression, right? It's Rose of the Riveter, with their biceps flexed. And the message was, we can do it. We can do it. When was the last time you had a government official stand up and say, we can do this? We're not going to rely on gimmicks. We're going to rely on sacrifice and hard work. And now they call that generation, right, that grew up in the Great Depression, we call them the Greatest Generation because we're all in together. And today, the public voice of government in New York and elsewhere is two crossed fingers. Really, it's luck. And it's not really two crossed fingers in front of you. It's really two crossed fingers behind your back, right? Which those of you know, that's a lie. Right? It's a lie. As a public voice of government. So that's what we've created a house of cards because of what we've incentivized. We've created this culture of casino fiscalism. So back to my question now. How do you put the toothpaste back into the tube? Or what do you do? What do you do? To answer my friend's question out in the West Coast is what would you do? Right? If you bought toothpaste, okay, 5 or 6 years ago, there was a big national scandal because there was some Chinese toothpaste coming in that was laced with ingredients that you put in antifreeze, right? That's what it's called. Superdent was one of the versions of it, Superdent. What did we do with that? What do we do? We threw it out. Right? The FDA stood up and said, get that stuff off our shelves. It's dangerous to our society. It's dangerous to our citizens. So how do you get the toothpaste back into the tube? You don't. You throw it out. And you get yourself a new thing of toothpaste. You start again. And the reason why this analogy is so important is your own governor has stood up and he said, listen, if I was governor years ago, I wouldn't have done this. I'm not a fan of government gambling, but it's here. That's where we always get the answer. Well, it's here, right? Our own leaders say that. It's not. You can change this. They can change this. It's in a failed public policy. Why would you expand a failed public policy? All right. So that's why I put a little strategy. What we do with bad toothpaste, we throw it away and we start again. All right. So this kind of to wrap up here a little bit. This goes right to the core of what makes me tick on this, and I think it makes many of you tick that are here as well. So I have a big secret, all right? I have a big secret. But, because everyone will say, what can you do, Les? Can you really make change on this? And I say, my big secret's this, that I live in a country, okay, where all blood is royal, all right? You got Queen Elizabeth, all right? She's got royal blood, You got Prince William and Princess Kate. They got royal blood. And then there's me. Right? Because I have royal blood. I live in a country where all blood is royal. We don't have kings or queens. Every person has royal blood in our society. And the challenge for all of you, and I think you're here because you're using your royal blood, is what we rule over, what we all collectively rule over, is broken right now. It's broken. And it's not a left or a right thing. It's broken, regardless of where you stand on the spectrum. And it's going to take all of us to fix it. But the only way we fix it is by participating and getting involved. So I'm glad you're here. But when Jason and calls on you and Dwayne calls on you to come out and do the work, you got to use that royal blood. And so it's fitting that this upcoming Sunday is Palm Sunday. Because I love to end on this theme of, power versus authority. Okay? Some people say, well, Les, you don't have the power to change this. Who are you to change this? I heard your royal blood thing. I like it, Les, but you're not going to change this. You're not going to change this. We certainly will change it. Because, some people say, you don't have the power to do it. Well, Pontius Pilate had the power, okay? But Jesus had authority. Okay? There's a difference. Power is when I have the ability to coerce you to do something. Okay, that's power. I can make you go do something. But authority is when you go do it on your own because you believe in it. So Jesus had authority. And so it's very fitting that we're here today talking about this as Palm Sunday, because we have to use the way we build authority in our society, and he showed the ultimate sacrifice of it, is you sacrifice. You sacrifice your time, you sacrifice your money. In my instance, I sacrificed much of my life. I gave up a lot to be here. But it's a calling. We've all been summoned, and we need to answer that summons. And so I have two asks of you, one of which relates to here in New York, but I have two asks today. One is, before you leave, is we are trying to build a national movement on this issue. So the only reason why New York's having this fight right now, and even your own legislative and executive leadership will say this, if we don't do this here in New York, they're going to go out of state, right? These gambling interests come in, they create this fake narrative that the political leaders pick up on, that they're going to go out of state to do this, so let's rationalize it. Forget the fact it's a failed policy. Forget the fact that we don't like it. Is they're going to go out of state if we don't do this. And so they just pit state against state deliberately. We need a national answer to this. We need a national conversation about this issue. And so I ask you, we're trying to collect the signatures of 500,000 Americans to sign a statement of principles that says government needs to get out of the gambling business so we can pursue a real prosperity for our future. Okay? It's called an American Declaration on Government and Gambling. So you can sign online. If you have a smartphone, your computer, you can sign online on our website, stoppredatorygambling.org. But I ask you, if we've awakened your conscience at all on this issue, I need you to do at least that one action, is to sign our declaration. All right. And then my other ask is, Dwayne and Jason and many others are actively engaged in stopping this casino fight in New York. They need you. They need your conscience. We need you to step up with your conscience and act on this. And so whatever they ask you to do, Jason's going to make a pitch later on about how you can get involved in this. But if you want to change the direction of our society, it runs through this issue. It runs through this issue. So thank you very much for your time today, and let's get to work.